Hello, hello, and you are tuning into another episode of The Actor's Agenda. Coachella week. Maybe if you're listening to this, you're recovering from Coachella Weekend 1, or you're preparing for Coachella Weekend 2. I think it's a pretty good lineup this year. Lana Del Rey, No Doubt, Tyler, the Creator. Throwbacks like Sublime, Taking Back Sunday. They also have Ice Spice, DJ Snake. I'm having a little bit of FOMO, to be honest, but you may notice that it is just me this week. There is no Clementine Heath. Well, I guess that's lesson number 57 on the actor's agenda. The show must go on. I am in Joshua Tree right now. I'm filming something, and Clementine and I could not be together in person to record the intro. So if you're watching on YouTube and it says episode intro with Mike and Clementine, I'm sorry, I lied to you. She will be back next week. So this week I am talking to my friend Vinny Chhibber. Vinny, like me, started in theater. He went to NYU Tisch School of the Arts. And then, of course, I was in Colorado. We both moved out to Los Angeles for film and television. He and I met in an acting class that was basically a class in some apartment complex lobby, but we were encouraged to write our own materials. We created a political pilot because we both like politics and ended up pitching it all around town. And I think back then, we didn't know that two first-time writers that met in an acting class weren't supposed to be pitching their pilot all around town, and that opened a ton of doors for us. I think it was sort of like ignorance is bliss. I think back then we didn't know that we weren't supposed to do that, and so we did it, and we made a lot of good contacts in doing so. That led us to create a handful of pilots for Lifetime, and we've continued producing and acting together ever since. The way it goes typically, for those that are listening that may not know, is you typically do maybe a student film or a short film, and then you work your way up to a co-star, and then a guest star, and then a top-of-show guest star, which basically just means you're more featured in the episode and you're paid more. And then you bump up to a recurring role, so that's multiple episodes, and then you work your way up to a series regular. And so over the years, Vinny and I have been friends for a decade now, and I've seen him start with smaller projects and work his way up, and now he's Jag Bowler on ABC's Big Sky. He was in Marriage Story, TNT's Animal Kingdom. He's on For All Mankind right now on Apple TV, which I love. I think a lot of what Vinny and I talk about is finding your tribe, surrounding yourself with people that believe in you and will support you, and also will creatively feed you and challenge you. I think a theme on this podcast, which I didn't really expect, but I'm not surprised by, is creating your own content. You know, the first episode with Leah McKendrick and Colton Tran after that, creating their own films, with Rahul Rai creating social media content, with David Archuleta creating music. All of these people are finding success because they are creating content that is theirs, that has their own creative fingerprint on it, and releasing it out into the world. They're not waiting for someone else to give them opportunities. They're creating their own opportunities. And I think, especially for actors, having people that know what you're going through, that know what it feels like to audition and get rejected, or to always be on call, and also to celebrate the good times when you book something, or when you're on set and a scene just feels really, really good and really connected, or you work with somebody that really just inspires you and somebody you've always wanted to work with. It's great to have your tribe to share the good times and the bad times. And Vinny is definitely doing that. I actually just went to his wedding earlier this year, to his beautiful bride, Raquel, who is also an actress. And I'm not surprised. They're both wonderful people, wonderful souls, really hard workers, and I'm not surprised they found each other. We're going to jump into the episode. Before we do that, I want to remind you that if you like the podcast, please follow us, rate us, comment on our posts, share. Word of mouth really helps continue what we're doing. Also, we want to hear from you. We want to interact. So if there's a topic that you would like me to talk about, or bring up with a guest, or a guest that you would like me to have on the podcast, please comment on our socials, or you can email actorsagendapod@gmail.com. That is actorsagendapod@gmail.com, and tell us what you like, what you don't like. Videos are available on YouTube. Audio is available on Spotify and wherever else you get your podcast. And without further ado, I present to you the episode with my friend, Vinny Chhibber.
It's the actor's agenda. Nah, 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 nah. It's the actor's agenda.
Hello, everybody. I am Mike Manning, and you are tuning into the Actors Agenda. Today, our guest is my good friend, writer, actor, producer, creative, Vinny Chhibber. Vinny,
Hey,
how you doing today?
I'm all right, man. I'm glad to see you. I'm glad to spend time. I'm glad to have the conversation that we have all the time.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I feel like that's what I want for this, and actually for the podcast in general, is just to feel like a living room conversation that I have with people that are much smarter than me.
Wow.
I know it's hard to find them.
So great. No.
There is not enough information that goes around about the industry of acting. So you have, so much information about the craft and the art and everything else. And then you have these red carpet interviews or maybe like Actors on Actors or whatever with like movie stars that are up here.
Yeah.
But there's not really, there's nothing that I've found that really captures the struggle and the ascension of actors that are making it, but they're still on their way up, kind of thing.
Yeah, like the nuts and bolts of someone that's like in it,
Yes.
right? As opposed to like, I don't know, when we look at people today and you see those interviews on red carpets, all of them have had their own type of struggle, but it was like a minute, right?
Yeah,
Since they've had
yeah.
to do it. And the challenges that we face now, even since we've met,
Yeah.
what it is to have a career, where you start, what you do is very different from when we met.
Yeah.
And even then, that was like this huge transition that was taking place at that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
That we found ourselves in the middle of. But like 90s was like
Actors face different challenges
Different
in the 90s,
challenges, right.
2000s, and now, I mean, did you think that, was it 10 years ago that we met?
real close.
Something
It was
like
something like
almost
that. It was
10
like-
years ago.
Yeah.
Vinny and I met in an acting class / creative workshop
Wow.
kind of thing that
Yeah.
basically took place in the lobby of an apartment complex. It was
true.
the acting school.
Yeah.
We don't have to get into it. But what was good about that experience, I think, is that we were encouraged to create. And you and I got together and we didn't like any of the scenes that were being offered to us in class. And so we said, let's create a scene.
Yeah.
And after a couple minutes of talking, we realized we both like politics.
Yeah.
So we were like, let's write a scene about politics.
Yeah.
Cut to a couple months later, you and I have a full political pilot.
Yeah, we do.
We are pitching it around town. We get accepted by Pivot TV
At the time,
which
yeah.
at the time it was underneath Participant Media, and we're in development with them for like 6 months, and it was very close to being greenlit.
Yeah.
And then
Obviously,
Pivot
what happens? What
restructured, and it didn't end up happening. But like, I don't think we knew at the time how special that was.
No, we didn't. Exactly, right? I think that's one of the changes that was taking place at that time, but I think we were right in the thick of it without knowing, was that like I said, before we got here, someone could book like 3 or a guest star or 2 guest stars or something, and like they're golden. But as there's been more work, the advent of digital cinema and all these things, it's like, it's harder to do that. And I think the value now is in being a multi-hyphenate. Like, it's really hard to do this if acting is your only, your only lane. And if you trending, you said you ran into Mark the other day, right? Like, Mark Duplass is a perfect example of this. Right? He does writes, directs, produces, acts. Like, guy understood that really early. But we were in this, like you said, like we're in the lobby of like a hotel,
like an apartment complex, like running our scenes. But I that's a good point. And I did just run into Mark Duplass, and you've hung out with him too.
Yeah.
And he's the perfect example of an actor who writes and produces and creates his own content. And I feel like over the last 10 years specifically, I would say there's been a huge shift before it was almost looked down upon for
Yes.
actors to have a production company
in your
and,
lane,
and
kinda.
doing other things
Yeah.
because it was almost seen like, oh, you don't book enough, so you need to produce now,
Right.
or acting's not going well, so you have to run your company or anything
Yeah.
else. But now it's almost like, no, I am invited to be a part of other people's stories, but
Yeah.
sometimes there are stories that I want to tell that are missing.
Yeah.
That are not even in existence, so I
Yeah.
couldn't be a part of them, even if those opportunities were there. So
Yeah.
I'm going to create my own.
Yes.
I am going to take the story that's in my brain and put it out on a page and write it and develop it and produce it myself.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to seek out a project that exists, a book, a something,
Yeah.
and work with the writer or adapt the IP or whatever. That is a story that I think the world needs. I'm going to find it.
Yeah.
And I feel like now it's almost strange if you're an established actor and you don't have a production company.
Yeah.
If you're not, Viola Davis or Reese Witherspoon with Hello
Right.
Sunshine,
Yeah.
or Leonardo DiCaprio, or Brad Pitt with Plan B. Like if you're not
Clooney or any of these guys, yeah.
these people that have their production companies, it's almost like, oh, of course they do. Of course they've reached a
Now.
certain amount of success. Now they need a production company.
Yeah.
And so it's different. There's like that paradigm shift, and you and I were doing that before that shift took place.
Yeah, or
Which
in
was
the thick
kinda
of
cool.
in the thick of it. Yeah.
No, we were trendsetters. It was like
Right, in that hotel.
yeah, in the hotel
basement. Yes.
Wait, so
Yeah.
you are my very good friend, and I've
Yes.
known you for a long time. People tuning in that don't know you, quick little bio. So Vinny is an actor, producer. He's been involved with acting and creating and developing numerous award-winning film and television projects. He starred as Jag Buller in ABC's Big Sky, as Liam in Ava DuVernay's The Red Line, Noah Baumbach's Marriage Story, TNT's Animal Kingdom, For All Mankind on Apple TV. He's pursued work behind the scenes with the production company Chhibber Mann Productions, Lost in America with Rosario Dawson, Tiffany Haddish, and the feature comedy Folk Hero and Funny Guy, which premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival before hitting theaters. You, Vinny, have worked with numerous philanthropic organizations, including My Friend's Place, the Boot Campaign, Young Storytellers, Ghetto Film School. You also co-founded the Salon, which is about encouraging and pushing for representation in the South Asian community in film and television projects. And you're working with young people in marginalized communities.
Yeah.
So I don't think you do enough. You're not busy enough. What do you do? No,
Yeah.
but yes, Vinny, you are my friend. Thank you so much for being here today. I think we're going to cover a lot. The goal is to sort of inform actors and young creatives, inform them how to do it nowadays. If they're working really hard, if they're in acting class, if they're studying their craft, what else? And there are so many. When I go around and I teach acting, I get the same questions again and again, especially from new and intermediate actors. And it's like, there needs to be a place where they can just go and listen and learn these things. And so that is the
Goal of
Actors Agenda podcast. Yeah. So Vinny, I'll start. Like, you are one of the most well-versed cinephiles I know. You love movies.
I do.
You love entertainment. You can name some obscure Japanese anime from 1997, but then you know what's playing in theaters right now. You love movies. You love entertainment. Have you always been like that, or was there a point that you can remember where it kind of clicked for you?
I think I've always loved story.
Okay.
So storytelling, whether it's in the form of books or comics or TV shows or movies or musicals, whatever it is, I've always loved stories from wherever. And I remember my first play I was like 10 years old. It was like an independent play, and I did it at the Columbus Flower Festival. And then I did my first real one was like this. It was in a small town. It was for like the 9th grade English honors. You had to do Romeo and Juliet.
Okay.
Like, you had to take part in it. You had no choice. You did it in a basketball gym with like 3 microphones. And the next year I moved to this high school in Florida, where I went from someplace. Oh, sorry. Then we did Greece. But like, I went from a place where like theater was not acting. Like there was no discussion about whether or not you do this for a living. It was just kind of you were doing this because of school. And then I moved to Florida my senior year, and I went to the school that I went from a stage, we did Grease on a stage that's about the size of this carpet, which is nuts.
Okay, so the carpet, for those listening, is about 10 feet by like 25 feet?
Yeah.
It's like the size of a swimming pool?
Yeah.
Small swimming pool?
A very small swimming pool.
Yeah. Hot tub?
And we didn't have, our props were plastic, even the cars for like Grease Lightning were cardboard cutouts that were painted. And I went from this to this school in Florida where you had a center of the arts. Like there was an orchestra pit.
Okay.
And you saw people, you had green rooms. It was great.
Yeah.
I mean, it was crazy. Yeah. But it was the first time I think that I recognized that I had a talent for it, and that it was something that felt like when I got up there and did it, there was something about it that felt safe and free. I hadn't quite locked into what it was, and then I went to college. My parents were like, "You're crazy. What are you thinking? No, this is a terrible idea." Which is what any responsible parent
of course
should do. They're like, no. So I tried a bunch of other stuff, and then I couple of years I tried not doing that. I tried to do everything, but I tried politics, I tried business, I tried all these things, and I finally took this intro to theater class, and I was like, okay, and it was a speeches and monologues class, and I convinced the head of the theater department to meet me every Saturday morning. To go over this 2-minute monologue that no one's ever heard of, but I was doing it and I couldn't figure out like what is it that I'm not doing, but I know there's something missing. Okay. I knew intuitively, I just didn't know what it was, and we did it for months, and then one day I got so frustrated, and this gentleman, his name is Tim McDonough, he probably does not remember me. I got so frustrated that I was like, I'm sorry, this is the stupidest idea I've ever had. I've come here every Saturday for months, and this is nothing. He's like, do it one more time. I was like, get out of here, Tim. He's like, do it one more time. And I did it, and it was like, people talk about having a religious experience. People talk about like where meditation makes them completely like present, right? And this, I believe, was the first time in my life that I felt what it was like to have my pores and my skin open up and breathe. I saw things. It was like the end of like the movie Highlander, where he feels the heartbeats of all things. I felt. Now I didn't know what I was doing, but I felt it for a moment. I felt like what it was like to be fully present and speak from my soul. Like it was I'm not a religious person, but this for me was that experience. And I was almost shocked by it. And, Tim being like, that was it.
Yeah, you tapped into the matrix.
I tapped into the matrix. Yeah. And I tried so hard, I just couldn't, I couldn't get back there again that day. And he said, you should honestly think about doing it. Just think about it. And then I graduated. I went home. I was home for 10 days, and I went up to New York City. And I was in a drama program up there, got accepted into a conservatory. I was there for almost 3.5 years, and really, really pushed me. You got to work with people that pushed you as far as you could go to be as present as you could and whatever.
So at that point, you were in high school or college?
No, I was in college. It was right after I graduated early, and then I went to the Adler Conservatory.
Got it.
In New York City.
Got it.
And I was working 3 jobs, and I was also in the studio. I didn't realize what I thought was it was going to be like, oh, I'll just get a job part-time, and then I'll go to school. But the level of commitment required was that wasn't going to happen. Like you didn't have time.
Wow.
That's all you were going to do.
Thrown right into the fire.
Yeah. Like every day.
And how long was that conservatory program?
3, I think it was 2.5 or 3 years. I was there for 3 years.
Yeah,
and then,
3 years every day.
And it was 9 to 6.
Wow.
4 days a week. And then you had to rehearse and do other things when you weren't in class. But I
So
think
at this point, you were
yeah.
committed. At this
Yes,
point, it was
yes.
not politics, not business,
No,
not
no,
everything
no,
else.
no.
It was I am jumping
This
headfirst
is it.
to try to live my life tapping into the matrix. Now that I've experienced
now that you've experienced it,
Okay.
right? And you know, I felt like if I was able to do this, like if I'm able to like sleep in Penn Station, if I'm able to like work jobs.
Yeah, 'cause it was kind of rough for you for a little bit, right?
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, I was eating peanut butter sandwiches for like a good year and a half.
Yeah.
Because you're paying. I was paying for school. I didn't take out loans, so I was like, whatever I made in the bar, whatever I did, was going right back into it. Fortunately, I had some friends who let me crash at their spot, but I mean, it was rough. But I think the best part about that situation was like, it really, at least to myself, I was like, well, if I'm willing to do this, right? If I'm willing to do all these things, that must mean there's something inside me. Whether I recognize that or not, I know that it's real.
Yeah.
Like that grit is there, that passion is there, because no one in their right mind
would put themselves
Put
through
themselves
that,
through that, right.
unless they were addicted
to
that type of
Yeah.
high that you get when you're performing and when you're tapping into
and
that
you know
place
that,
you went
right?
to.
When you're present, it doesn't happen every take. But
But
when it
happens,
does,
yeah.
that makes everything else worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
like,
so. I think all actors are a little crazy.
Yeah, you have to be.
A little crazy to pick up from wherever you came from,
Yeah.
to pack up your car or to pack up your luggage and
Yeah.
to come out here to Los Angeles or New York or Atlanta or wherever with a hope and a dream. You have to be a little crazy. But it's also, and I do think nowadays it's a little easier with like self tapes and with people like now people don't necessarily have to travel to New York or Atlanta or Los Angeles, at least in the beginning, while they build credits, while they work regional theater, or while they do local films or local whatever. But when you did it, I mean, it was like there's no going back, right? You had to come here and I think you were a little crazy.
You have to. There has to be some. It's like anyone that runs for president of the United States, right? Not to put us there, but anyone that says, yeah, I can totally run a company of run a country of like 400 million people. Of course, I can do that.
Yeah, of course I can do that.
I'm uniquely qualified to do that. Like, there is this, and because you're right. Like, there's a little. You got to have a little bit of like self-belief that isn't rational. Mm-hmm. It is just a gut feeling,
a gut
and
thing
a need.
of I can do this.
Yeah.
What point did you feel after moving here like, man, I'm an actor now? Like I made it as an actor.
It took me a long time.
Yeah. Okay.
And I say that not ever feeling, it wasn't like, I'd never questioned my talent or my work ethic, but I think the industry is set up to make you question whether or not you are legitimate, whether you question whether or not like you belong here. I think it's, and I don't mean that, I don't think it's malicious. I think it is, look, you go out for 800 auditions, however often you audition, right? How often do you actually hear back from people telling you like, well, Mike, this is the reason you didn't get the role. It didn't have anything to do with your talent. We just didn't like the shirt you were wearing. You know what I mean? Like no one,
be anything.
If you don't get anything back, and more often than not, whether or not you're talented, you have no idea why you got a role or why you didn't. And so it's got to be the strength has got to be upstairs that says, despite despite the fact that like, I don't know, I'm putting stuff out into the void, because at least before when you had auditions, you would go in and you could interact with the person, at least get a sense of.
You get a sense of
like,
what
this went
the
really
reaction
well. Like
to
you
it.
see something. But you don't even have that anymore, and you're sending these tapes
out into the void.
And you don't know.
Like you attach your little tape to the courier pigeon, it flies away, and you don't hear anything back.
But even in the room, you might give a killer audition. You'll slay it, and you don't get a call back. You don't get any feedback whatsoever. It's like that's where a little bit of crazy, but also hard work leads to that kind of self-belief. You know that you're one of the hardest working people I know.
Thank you.
And like, but when you get those opportunities, whatever those opportunities are, you are absolutely ready for them. Because you keep going back and working as hard as you can every single time.
I remember, I think it was in the class we were talking about.
Yeah.
Joe Manganiello, he was on True Blood. He was on...
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Is this when we were talking to him outside?
We were talking to him outside.
Okay.
And then also in class, he came and he was a friend of...
Yeah.
And he was in the class and he told the story. He gave an analogy that acting is like... The acting industry and being an artist is like filling a piñata. Do you remember that?
No.
Do you remember the piñata? So he goes, every class you take, every accent you learn, every musical you learn, every instrument you play, everything that you do as an artist, you're putting a piece of candy into that piñata.
Oh, okay.
And then during the course of your career, you're gonna take some wax at the piñata. You're gonna get that meeting. You're gonna get that audition. You're gonna get something. Sooner or later, that piñata is gonna break.
Yeah.
And what falls out,
Yes.
the either the riches that fall out or the nothing that falls out, depends on how much work you put in every step of the way. I just loved that analogy.
It's a great
because
it is
because then it sort of changes the perspective of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
In terms of like, it's not for nothing.
Yeah.
All this work, all these hours, everything I'm doing, it's not for nothing. I'm taking a piece of candy and I'm putting it somewhere that nobody sees yet, but they're going to see it someday.
And you don't know who's watching either, by the way. You never know who's watching.
Yeah.
And you're right in that, like, every audition is also the opportunity to perform. It's easier said than done to accept that. But once we do, man, it makes it so much more plausible, because then you're like, all right, this is the best I can do. This is my take on it. Like, when I read whatever this piece was, this is how it resonated for me.
Yeah.
And whether I book it is not whether I worked hard enough, because I worked hard, and it's not an indictment of my talent or my personality. It's does my interpretation of what this is fit into what the showrunner or the producers have in mind?
Yes, you actually are somebody that has helped me realize that, because you've always been a bit more, and I know you moved here earlier than I did. Yeah. You've always been a bit more confident in your process. And I think I am now, and I think I'm in a really great place mentally. But I think at the time of us working together in the beginning, I think at that time you were much more confident in, this is my take on the character. I'm gonna lay it all on the floor and like take it or leave it, producers, or take it or leave it, casting director. Like you were more, you had an ownership of who you were as a person, as an actor, and your take on characters. That I think I learned after you. But once you sort of have that, it's a beautiful place to be.
It is,
because it takes the pressure off of you to, quote unquote, book a job
or please people.
Yeah. And it also gives you a pride in what you're doing again, because you're like, listen, this is my take on the character. This isn't my audition, whether it's in the room or a self-tape, is not me trying to impress you.
Yes.
It is me showing you my take on this character in this situation with the information I have.
Yes.
And then you send it off and take it or leave it.
Take it or leave it. And that doesn't mean you can't, whether it's in the room or you're on the callback or whatever. Obviously, it's a collaborative space. So like, you're going to have people, and you book the job, you're on set. Inevitably, there's going to be a writer, there's going to be a producer, and there's going to be a director and a showrunner, all of whom talk to you at some point.
Yeah.
And all of whom give you notes.
Yeah.
At some point.
Yeah.
I'm not saying all on the same show, but but I think what you said is an important one, is that there's a pride that comes with, this is my voice. This is for this minute and a half or 5 minutes that I'm here, whether it's on tape or in the room. Like, I'm going to show you how what you wrote manifested in me. Like, how did it hit me? What do I think about it? And then everything else comes from that. But I think if you fall into the trap of, and I think a lot of people do, a lot of younger actors do, or a lot of people, I shouldn't say younger, a lot of newer people that are new, the idea that like you have to please, like you have to like go in there and give them what they want to see.
Yeah.
Which is a terrible, it's almost like kneecapping you in the very beginning, because you're you're not authentically coming from where it's you playing someone else so that they will like that idea of whatever it is you think they want. And it rarely, if ever, works. And rarely, if ever, is it like, are we connected to it?
Because it's false.
It is, well,
you're not building a character and making choices specific to you and what your personality, how it connects to the character. You're being like, oh, I'm going to change myself to what I think they want.
Right.
And it's false.
And
people can see right through that.
Though they'll feel, even if they don't see it, they can, you know what I mean? Like, when you watch a performance, you know.
Yeah.
Whether you've studied drama, whatever, it's the audience. I mean, Clerman said the audience is the toughest critic you'll ever have because they see everything. They feel everything. They may not know why. Like people say, oh, that's a great actor and that's a great performance. They don't know how it got there, but they knew it was because they were in it.
It moved them.
Yes. Yeah. And I think the only way to really go about that is being as authentic as you can in your process and what you bring to the table when an audition or a role comes through.
Okay, so that's auditioning.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about being on set working. So you've been on Big Sky, you've been on Red Line, For All Mankind.
Yeah.
These shows where you're a character and it's not just, oh, I'm going to stop in for a guest star.
Yeah.
It's, I have to build a character that is going to last, this amount of episodes or this amount of seasons. And it's a character that audiences are going to see again.
Yes.
That a character that has to be consistent throughout these episodes, has to have a consistent point of view.
Yeah.
What is your process for building a character, a TV character like that?
So the first thing I want to start with is that every show is different. Every set is different. You know that. And it really depends on what you're coming in on. So, for example, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's a 1-episode guest star, typically speaking, you still have an arc within the confines of that episode that you really want to be able to hit the tone of the show, all those things that you do anyways, right? With regards to like recurrings, typically speaking, in my experience, I don't actually know. Like they'll say, "Oh, we're gonna have we'll have him here for like 5 episodes," but you don't actually know. You're not. You try. Like there are bits and pieces that you may, if you're a recurring, you may be able to talk to the showrunner. You may be able to talk to the writer. Yeah. But it's still. Like, you don't know if it's going to be 3 episodes. I was only supposed to be in Big Sky for, I think, 3 episodes.
Okay.
And it ended up being, I think, 15 or 16.
Yeah, okay.
But initially, I was supposed to die off, like, early.
Okay.
And I had such a great time on that set with all my cast members. But what I think I try to do is always have a point of view, always make a choice. Like, and this comes back to authenticity because if you come in and if I come in or you come in or whatever, and you make a choice, there's somewhere for us to go with it.
Yeah.
Whether it's in line with what the writers had or the director had, they can redirect you. Yeah. Right. If they believe what you're doing, they could be like, okay, love that take, but actually you like this person, or actually this person,
because they see the full puzzle.
They can see it, they can see it. You may not be informed of it, but you still have to come in and have a point of view and make a choice. The other thing I'd say is be confident in those. Like it's really easy coming in as a guest star or a recurring on a show, especially one that's been going for like 3-4 years. Like everybody else is kind of in a pattern, and you got to just come in not knowing anyone, and usually you have the heaviest lift. Like you've done
because your character is carrying the storyline of the episode. Yes, and these other people are there.
They're responding to you're the linchpin of whatever that whatever the episode is, especially on something like Chicago Med or whatever
some
NCIS.
Of these procedurals.
Because usually that's the hardest for me. That is by far the hardest job is coming in on a procedural and whatever the guest star of the week is, because the amount, just the sheer amount of dialogue and things you have to do, you're the one carrying.
Yeah, and no, I agree with you. Yeah, I remember. I remember when I booked. It was Major Crimes, and in the episode, I had to be interviewed by the cops, and then and convinced them I didn't do it. And then I had to be in my workplace where I'm showing the cops footage that I, and this wasn't on camera, but it was like footage that I had created on social media of the victim who I had just murdered. So I'm like, so I had to like have that backstory in my head of like, this is the footage. And then I had to be found out, run through a field, take a girl hostage, and with a gun, and then get arrested, and then confess to everything,
all in 8 days.
all in one episode.
Yeah,
and it was like you're to your point. It's the arc is there, and it's truly like showing 8 different sides of this one character. Yeah. And if any of those sides are not authentic, it affects the entire episode.
It affects everything because your arc is the episode.
Yeah.
But and also that comes down to work. It comes down. It's like. It's hard work, but the more work, every audition that we have, that I have, I feel like you said, you know, whether it's the piñata metaphor or another opportunity to dig in to ourselves and broaden our scope artistically and personally, so that when you get on set and you have all that stuff to do, and by the way, usually. Your coverage is going to be shot last, meaning like you're not going to have as many takes, even though you're the one you're the one carrying. Yeah. You're not going to have as many takes. And
they want to make their stars look good, and then you get the last 2-3 takes.
Sometimes
it's different.
You're fortunate enough to like. They're like, okay, well. This guy has like
I
5
actually
monologues.
like that. I mean, unless it's a scene where I have to keep it fresh and I want to hear it for the first time on camera.
Yeah.
I actually kind of like that because it lets you settle into it.
Yes.
And get the rhythm of the scene and
feel it out.
And also like you don't know how they're going to play it. So your performance can be dictated and changed a bit by how the others play it. If they're pushing you, if they're kind, if they're slow, if they're fast. So I actually do kind of like that.
Yeah.
Unless they run out of time and I only get like 2 or 3 takes.
But you know, there's this great story on A Few Good Men, and it was a scene in the courtroom, and it's right before the infamous monologue.
Yeah, I want the truth. Yeah. You can't handle the truth.
We live in a world where blah blah. You know, Nicholson goes off, right? Yeah. And Nicholson had made it a point, summarizing a bit, and said like, oh, just shoot my stuff last. And Reiner was like, and they start on cruise, they get all the coverage, they get all the extras, and halfway through the day, he's like, he goes over to Nicholson, he's like, yo man, you want to pair back? He's like, what? He's like, you're going 100%, like 100% every take you're going. Yeah. And Nicholson, why wouldn't I? I love this stuff. Yeah. Like I'm here for this. Like this is, and I'm sure part of it was what you said, which was like, it allows you to get into this rhythm and you're able to see the whole board as opposed to like going in blind, not really knowing what people are going to be doing. So it's a cool.
And Nicholson too, I remember there's an interview that he was doing, I think it was with Leonardo DiCaprio. And he was talking about how he told Leo when they were preparing, maybe it was for The Departed. Okay. And he was like, hey, you know why I've been so successful in this industry? And Leo goes, why? And he goes, because I'm a damn good writer. And because he, throughout his career, he's not only taken ownership of these characters and crafted these characters, but also changed the dialogue to fit how because a writer creates a character, a director gets to know a character, but nobody knows the character better than the actor playing that character if they've done their research and worked on it. Yes. And if they've done the work. And so it's like Nicholson, throughout his career, he's done the work, and then he ultimately ends up, whether he's working with Scorsese or whomever, that informs how he says the dialogue, but also the words themselves. Yeah. And so I think a few times in a few different interviews, he said, look, I'm an actor, but I'm also a damn good writer. Yeah. Because he has that. He's taken ownership of like these characters.
I think you earned the right to do that.
And you earned the right to do that. Yeah, I'm not going to, day one on my first film, I'm not going to be like, I have some notes,
But to your point, I think that taking that ownership of the character is, but I think you have to have it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's, you know.
So for you, what is your favorite part about working on For All Mankind? We'll just go there.
I think For All Mankind, the experience, and I should say this, every job is different. We learn something different from every job. For All Mankind, I found that the scale of that show is just, everything about it is big. I mean, big themes, big sets, big everything. And it was the first time I worked on something, you know, where I would get lost on the set. I'm not even joking.
Yeah.
Like, it's just crazy. Was that, and I've said this a lot, but it didn't really hit me because I've always thought to myself, like, the work doesn't change. Like, whether you're in a black box theater, whether you're doing a self-tape, whether you're doing community theater back home, or you're on set with Spielberg, like, the work is always the same. The commitment to the work is always the same. And it didn't hit me quite so hard as it did on this particular show because there's so many moving parts. There was a day when, I mean, it felt like it was a 2-page monologue for me, and it was one take. It was 3 different action cues. So, like, in between my lines, they said action to start me, and then I'm saying, and then blah, 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 action. And then I have to keep going. Like, I have to keep going, and it's a oneer with, like, people floating in the background.
So the camera's rotating and they're showing changing things as you're speaking in real time.
In real time.
Yeah, that's fun.
Which is crazy. But and thankfully, you know, I got through that day. But I think to your point, to the question, I should say, I think what I learned on that one, what I really understood is, like, really the work doesn't change. You still have to be, there's no way I can go in there and do that with all, like, it's not class. You know what I mean? In class, like, you can mess up, you can you can go on for a little longer.
Yeah.
You cannot do that on a oneer with, like, a crane coming down. There are 8,000 moving pieces. That's where craft comes in. That's where work comes in. So every audition that we've had up till this point, every job that we've done up till this point prepares
you to not have a nervous breakdown in that moment.
Yeah.
Where there are 150 people looking at you
and, like,
as you do your monologue. 20 other actors in the scene, a camera moving around, the lights, everything. All of the work that you've done thus far and all the work you did specifically for that character prevents the house of cards from falling in that moment.
And it will
from the
sometimes,
pressure.
and even if you do all those things.
Yeah.
It you know that, like, it just, sometimes that happens too. So I think the learning, for me, that was it. The other thing was making sure that I held on to that feeling. Because when you because that show is starring super talented people. The writing is excellent. The production value is crazy. The director's the guy, Ron Morris show running. Like,
and it's Apple, like, right? Spares no expense.
There's no expense spared, and it's all people that are really, really good at what they do. And, you know, look, I struggle with this. Everybody does. It's like I walked into that and I was like, initially it was like, don't mess up. Like, dude, you was like, this is like, don't. And it was just a terrible attitude. You don't want that. And that despite the work. So I can't imagine not, like, if I wasn't prepared or, like, I hadn't done the thing beforehand, it would have been, you know, even more challenging, I think. But I think that was my big take from For All Mankind.
Okay. And let's talk about the red line.
The difference between, well, one, just knowing the difference between, like, series regular, fractional series regular, special guest star, recurring guest star, co-star, like, you know what I mean, the hierarchy. When you book a series reg, typically speaking, you're going to have conversations with the creators of the show, the producers of the show, the showrunner. It's probably one of those people anyways. And you have discussions about, okay, this is, because ultimately acting is one piece of a larger kind of pie, right? And it's almost like jazz. All these things work in concert with all these people. There are different inputs, whether it's hair and makeup or the music or the editing, right? So when I come in and I've got a particular idea of like who the person is, where their heart is, what they're going for, what their challenges are, like that's all work that I've done not knowing anything.
Yeah.
Right? I've only read the pilot script, so I don't actually know.
Yeah. You're doing your
going.
best with the information you have so that
Yes.
you go in armed,
Right.
at the best you can be.
The best you can be.
And then you go in and everything might change.
And everything might change, but 9 times out of 10, I will highlight something or you will highlight something that the writers never even thought about.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
At that point in doing the work, you have now done. Know if you've done the work,
Right.
that character more than anybody else, better than anybody else.
Yes. And then there are people that will come in and be like, hey, this is what we're thinking.
Yes.
Or this is the arc. What do you think? And
Okay.
you can say like, oh, that's interesting. Well, how about this? Or like, maybe we try this. And even, I mean, coming down to like, and you'll have some of this, I will say, with regards to like wardrobe. Like you won't have as much time, when it comes to guest stars or recurrings, but like you may have a little bit more time and have some say. But series reg is different. You go in and typically, hopefully, meet the writer's room. They get a sense of who you are because what they wrote without you in mind. So I think in the Red Line specifically, that character was supposed to be, I can't remember, it was written somewhere, like not the comic relief, but was like, I'm a much more earnest person, and as we both know, I'm not funny. So
I think you're hilarious.
what the idea for them was in the play was that like it was more I'm forgetting specifically the words involved, but like I came in, my interpretation of Liam was someone earnest in their interactions with everybody in the world. And that changed the way that they wrote and they saw the character.
Because originally he was more sarcastic and a bit more.
He was more lighter isn't the word I'm looking for here. Funnier probably isn't the word, but like it was
maybe a bit more guarded. If you're earnest, was he a bit more guarded or
maybe more sarcastic? Maybe
Okay.
I didn't have access to the original kind of thing, but my read was that like that's what it was. But when I came in and I read, they're like, oh no,
interesting. I love that. I love that story because back to our previous point of like a lot of times these directors or casting directors or even the writers that have written these scripts and these characters have been living in their brains for a while, they don't know exactly what they want until they find it. And they might think that they know what they want, and then you come in and have something totally different, and they're like, "Wait a second, I never thought of it that way." But yes, now my character on the page and this actor brought something to it.
Yes,
and we're gonna make something better.
Yes,
yeah.
And but that can only happen if you're being your most authentic self.
Yes, and not afraid to speak up.
And not afraid to speak up.
About that. Okay, so all of that with your acting and with your process, I think nowadays especially it is even more important for actors to also create, like you're talking about, so that they can see the other side. I don't know about you, but when I cast my first project, you and I did a series of short films that were basically concept pitches for Lifetime. Lifetime movies. But they were trying to discover their next series. And so you and I put together a series of shorts, and even in doing that, casting those shorts, but then also shooting. And I think you and I wrote all of them. We each took turns directing and everything. And that whole process to me was so incredibly eye-opening because
it was.
I would have friends that were great actors that would come in and read and just didn't fit the role.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be like, it wasn't your performance. It was just this. It was this. And there are 1,000,001 reasons why an actor doesn't book the job. a lot of them have nothing to do with the performance. You can go in and give the audition of a lifetime,
and you won't get it.
But you won't get it because the character in the story, the character has to look a certain way or talk a certain way or have
be a certain height,
or
which is crazy.
Oh,
but,
I'm sorry, you look too close to somebody we already cast, or a million and one reasons that have nothing to do with performance. That's why I never try to book the job now. New Mike, evolved Mike, doesn't try to book the job. I try to give my take on this character, right? Because then if it's not right for that piece, like if my piece of the puzzle is not right for that puzzle, my piece of the puzzle might be right for a different puzzle.
And they will see it.
And they will see it. They keep you in mind. Casting
100%.
directors are incredibly smart. And they are rooting for you. They want you to be the answer to their prayers. They want you to come in and give a great performance. And then if not, then they're going to keep you in mind for something else that you're better for. So it's incredible. How was you and I formed a production company, Chhibber Mann Productions, Vinny Chhibber, Mike Manning, Chhibber Mann, and we produced some cool stuff. I mean, we did. Folk Hero and Funny Guy, working with Jeff Grace as the director, Wyatt Russell, Melanie Linsky, Alex Karpovsky, Meredith Hagner. It was a great cast, great film. We went to Tribeca together for the first time, and that was fantastic. And then Folk Hero and Funny Guy. I'm sorry. Folk Hero and Funny Guy. Sorry. And Lost in America. The documentary about youth homelessness. Where we're sitting there listening to, Jewel, who has a Grammy, talking about homeless youth and living on the streets. Halle Berry talking about her time in a battered women's shelter. Rosario Dawson talking about how she, helps the homeless community and the charity that she does. John Bon Jovi talking about the same thing, his charity. It was amazing. And at least for me, and I want to get your take on this, for me, at that time, I didn't realize how amazing that was because I was so focused on the story, on telling the story of youth homelessness. And I was excited for that story to be out in the world. It didn't click to me that I shouldn't have been in the room with Oscar winner Halle Berry, talking about these things, and shouldn't have been in the room with these Grammy-winning artists and Tiffany Haddish, who's is having her moment. And what was that? What was that experience like for you?
Well, I do. You absolutely should have been in the room because if you're not in the room, that documentary is not getting made.
True.
Like I think that there is something to be said for. I think you and I are very similar in this, is that hard work leads to self-belief. Like the idea, the part of the, I know that you're like focused on the story, but, and all those things, but also like whether or not and I mean actors just in general, like if whether or not you have booked the role yet, or whether or not you have booked yet, is not an indictment of you or your talent or whether or not you belong in the room. That, whether you feel like you belong or you feel like you don't, you're right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me.
You shouldn't apologize. I just want to make sure that
not thinking. No, you're right. It was not. It caring about the story. And helping homeless youth allowed me to feel that I belonged in the room.
Okay.
When it's
I
not
understand
me,
what you mean.
Halle Berry and I should grab coffee and just chat about life. That maybe personally, I was like, I haven't done anything to have Halle Berry want to meet with me for coffee. But I care so much about the issue of youth homelessness that I'm going to scream about it from the rooftops, and everybody should care. The president of the United States, doesn't matter how many Oscars you have, how many little gold statues from what category, everybody should care. And as long as that is my focus, I deserve to be in every room talking to everybody about it. So I think, at least for me, that was like an aha moment where if we're focusing on story,
nothing else matters.
Nothing else matters. If it's selfish and it's focusing on, I need this opportunity, help me, it's about me. Then I think that people can see right through that, and at least for me, that feels yucky.
And the work's just not as fulfilled as I think otherwise would be.
And I think that's across the board with scripted or unscripted, right? If you have a story to tell and it's a good story, people connect with that.
They do. Yes, right? They do. And I think something to be said for like For me, I think metaphor for this is like when someone is, I don't know if you've seen this recently, but there are a number of people that are using teleprompters for self-tapes. And there are people that book off that, and I mean, more power to you. I personally, I don't know how I was like, I tried it and did not go well for me. But I think, and I don't want to like judge anybody. Sometimes you get 5 auditions and like it's really hard to prep all those things at the same time. For me, I'm off book. Like I have to be off book. I have to be present. I can't be worried about, oh, what's the line? Like, and if I'm having to look down every time, I'm not really connecting to the story, to the character, or to the person across from me. I think there's a difference.
Absolutely.
I think there's a difference in performance, and I also think there's an internal difference in the experience. And I would say the same thing to address what you just said. It's like if you're watching something or you're involved in a project that someone has literally bled for, like their blood, sweat, and tears are on the table, you know it. You can, you can feel it, and this person has got like
you can sense how deep they cut.
Yeah, like there's conviction there that I think comes from that type of commitment that just bleeds onto the screen or bleeds onto the page.
Yeah,
I think, and maybe I'm naive, but
no, you're right, and you're a purist, you're an artist, right? I mean, I will admit I always try to be off book, but there sometimes is the occasional time where I use the iPad. And I'm like, I have to pull this. It's a whole paragraph of medical jargon. I got
really
this yesterday. I don't have any time. I have to do it. So, but I think, I mean, I do the best job I can.
You do the best you can. So long as it's that, I think it's the moment that someone, and again, maybe people can do this. I personally can't, where it's a cold read off an iPad.
Oh no, I can't.
That is crazy. I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, there's some people who can. I am not one of those.
I can't do that.
Like I really. The medical jargon thing is real. Yeah. Any technological, scientific, medical jargon is like.
Yeah. Okay, so I only have you for a limited time, so I have 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
Number 1, what do you do outside of acting to stay positive, to stay sane, to stay happy?
That's a really good question. I think that's something that every self-care is a huge part of I'm not even forget the career itself. I'm talking about just like for any artist. I think it's imperative because this is the instrument we have, and most of it comes from here and from here.
Vinny is gesturing to his body and then his heart,
my
and
heart,
his mind.
and my brain. I do feel like meditation changed my life.
Okay.
I met you after I think I had started to meditate, and I feel like that given the amount of, we audition for so many things. We're told, like we said, you're told no most of the time, and you don't know why, and it's really easy to fall into the trap of like, well, I'm not booking, so I'm bad. Yeah, I'm not talented, or I'm not worthy of being here. And I think, at least for me, meditation's a big one. However that manifests. For some people, like to sit outside and walk on the grass. Some people chant. Some people, it's different for everybody. Say that's a big one. I think surrounding ourselves with people that are truly support. Community is huge.
Finding your tribe.
Find your tribe. Commit to them. Have them commit to you. And I mean that in a way like you show up for each other. That you're there for each other, whether it's the highest highs, the lowest lows. These are people that are going to have your back, and it's a huge deal to have a good group of creatives, but a good group, more importantly, a good group of friends. Yeah. And have interests outside. So for me, I'm a huge sports guy. I'm a huge plant person. I think I have like 40 indoor plants.
Yeah. You have a lot of plants.
I do.
It's like Jumanji up in there.
It really is. Cooking. I love traveling. I think having a full life lends to having a much broader scope as an artist, and hopefully the more we experience, the more empathy we have, the more colorful the choices that we make. You know, where are we pulling from? We're pulling from here.
Yeah,
the more
I love
we
that.
can experience, the deeper, hopefully, our understanding of the human experiences, and the more compelling choices we can make when we're faced with it. You know, faced with work.
I love that. I love that. Okay, last question. If you could go back and tell young Vinny, who wants to pursue a career in this crazy industry, if you could give him one piece of advice, what would it be?
Start writing immediately. Like, you just start creating, and don't be afraid of not knowing everything. Like, work as hard as you can, learn as much as you can. But the moment, and I didn't know this for a long time, I actually learned this on those shorts that we were doing, ironically, is that the actual conceptual application is how I learn. So I'm going to learn more like being on set, like the thing we had, right? When we were like, oh, you only get 2 takes, and you're the last person of the day. The sun is setting. Everyone's like, you got 100 people around you. You know, we had to deal with that on those shorts. We didn't have the money. So you only got 2 takes because we only have money for 2 takes.
Yeah.
So you had to deliver.
Yeah.
And so you learn from me. I learned so much about my artistic process from just the act of creating.
Yeah.
And that's not just the shorts. That's the scene, even the scene we wrote, because it went through all these different evolutions as we were writing it. And we had to get up and we put it up on its feet. And you know what? The world didn't end. No one was struck by lightning. But we learned so much about ourselves and about ourselves as artists over the course of that. I learned more from that than anything else, I think. Was the idea that, like, we're going to write, we're going to produce, we're going to direct, and we're going to act.
Why did we do that?
Which was crazy. And by the way, I should point out that we had a budget for 1 project.
Yeah.
But because Mike and I are who we are, we did 5 with the same amount.
5 with the same budget and the same timeline. Yeah. They're like, you have 3 weeks and this amount of money, and you make your one short film. And we're like, well, cool, we're going to make 5.
We're gonna do 5. But we learned, it was invaluable, because I don't know that we would have done, the things we had done, whether it's producing, whether it's writing, whether it's acting, whatever it is in the industry. I don't know if we're here without that.
Yeah, it's fair.
Because I'm sure there were lessons you learned too.
Oh, absolutely.
You learn from doing.
We're gonna have to have you come back on this podcast.
Yeah,
I could talk to you for 10 hours.
We could.
But if young Vinny, if you're listening or if you're watching, start writing, start creating. Don't wait for opportunities. Create your own opportunities. This is the Actors Agenda. I'm Mike Manning, and thank you, Vinny Chhibber, for being. Of course.
Thanks
if
for having me.
people want more of you, where are you on social? Or
on Instagram. Chhibber on Instagram.
Chhibber on Instagram. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
It's the Actors Agenda. Na na na.